Hello, everybody, and welcome to our monthly update call on the digital framework and digital government across the government of BC. As usual, it's an absolute pleasure to be connecting with you all. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I'm Jamie Boyd. I'm the Chief Digital Officer. We have a great overview to provide today. We're going to be providing our usual update on digital government, and then we have a wonderful guest speaker joining us today who's going to be speaking about modernizing the education system in British Columbia. So just as a quick reminder for those of you who perhaps haven't joined one of these calls in the past, we are on quite the journey of digital change here across the government of BC. We've been at this for a number of years, but really accelerating some of the great work across government over the last year and a half, 2 years or so. Really trying to push things forward with BC's digital framework. So you've got some of the pillars that are laid out on the screen just as a reminder some of the priorities that we had set for ourselves. So focusing on services to citizens, trying to make sure that there's great stewardship of data and information, ensuring that we can be digital inside so that public servants like those on the call today can access the right tools, and then being connected outside, making sure that we're working for and with the communities that we serve. Lots of updates. There have been a couple of really big wins since the last time we had this conversation, and I think it's a real testament to some of the wonderful work that's happening in digital teams across government. Obviously, today is a big day in the world of digital government in BC, with vaccine registration rolling out online. So I'd really like to recognize our friends and colleagues over in the health sector, in the Ministry of Health, who have been stewarding this transition over to phase 3 of the COVID response. So millions of people are going to be able to book vaccine appointments online, and that was launched today. So starting today, we are now in phase 3 of BC's COVID-19 immunization plan, and eligible adults are now going to be able to follow a really easy 3-step process to register and book vaccine appointments online. It's worth taking a look at because folks who are able to now register include those who are over 71, Indigenous peoples over 18, and those who are clinically extremely vulnerable. So it's nice to see that digital tools really are being put to work to address some of the most urgent problems or challenges that we're having to address in our government. So big congratulations to the teams. I know that lots of different teams from across the health sector and the Ministry of Citizen Services have been working hard to roll this out. So congratulations. There have been a number of other really interesting initiatives. One of the teams here in the OCIO did some work to consolidate examples from across government. So you should be able to see these laid out. And it's really, I think, quite remarkable to see how much progress has been made. The graphic that you see on your screen is for results as of March. And just, a couple of highlights, over 6 million visits to that COVID self-assessment tool. The travel screening app that we've talked about in the past, that involved over 50,000 plans being submitted. And I think we've talked about how quickly that application was stood up. So 7 days. And then we had the temporary foreign worker travel plan app. That was stood up in just 3 days. Also, lots of wonderful community supports through Connecting BC. That's over $50 million of government investment. So some really great initiatives happening as part of COVID response. And of course, just more broadly, we're continuing to see lots of engagement across all of the ministries across government around digital change. So great announcements coming out in the last month from Jerry around tech sector development, including lots of new jobs through a partnership with Microsoft, so new jobs being created in Vancouver. We saw colleagues over at the Ministry of Finance building processes to facilitate the property tax grant program. So using a secure online application there, continued investment in making sure that people are able to access government services through online whenever possible and in a user-centric way. So really, it's quite exhilarating to see the extent to which there are these wonderful investments happening across government. one of the sectors where I think that we really do need to engage on and be aware of is in the education sector. So with that, I'm really delighted to introduce our guest today. Eleanor Liddy is the Ministry CIO responsible for the Ministry of Education. And just, I think many of us have younger people in our lives, have kids or nieces and nephews who have really had to navigate a brave new world in the wake of COVID when it comes to education. So I'm really excited to have a conversation about how technology and digital is allowing government to better serve students. So welcome, Eleanor.
Oh, thanks very much for that introduction, Jamie. And I am joining you today from my home, which is on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen people, home of the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. And sorry, I have a cat on the dining room table who has just decided to appear. My apologies. Times of COVID, so.
It's not a COVID team call if you don't have animals or children or somebody wandering into the frame. So with that, I'd love to hear a little bit of an overview about your team, your priorities. Tell us a little bit about the MCIO role over in education.
Sure. So in education, we are, the MCIO role is actually part of my ADM role. So I'm ADM of Services and Technology. So we have a fairly small ministry, about 300 staff in Victoria and Vancouver. But our team focuses both on providing services to the sector as a whole, and then our internal clients. So just a little context: BC has 60 different school districts with about 1,600 schools, about 300 plus independent schools, and we also support the Yukon Territory, which I think a lot of people aren't aware of. So we have a lot of clients, including the 600,000 students and the 40,000 plus teachers and all their parents. And so we do a lot of work both inside and outside. So the key things for us are providing a really robust infrastructure for the education sector, which includes a high-speed network, which we work with OCIO on. A student information service, MyEdBC, that does all the timetabling, is what schools use to run their whole program. Lots of work around e-exams and results. So we have both an internal and a large external facing kind of responsibility and accountability.
So, obviously a very easy job, super simple, not a lot of stakeholders. So, I mean, just such a huge impact on communities across BC then. I'd love to hear how your role has changed with COVID. What has been the impact of COVID on your work, on your plans, on what your teams are up to? I'd love to hear what's been the overall impact.
Yeah, so we had a number of projects underway, and then everything changed March 2020, when basically our entire focus became on keeping learning going for the 600,000 plus students in the province. So the first thing we had to do was get that shift both for our staff to remote work, but also to our schools for the shift to remote and online learning. If you remember, schools did close down face-to-face instruction except for the children of essential workers. So we looked and heard very quickly what tools are required. We acquired very fast Zoom at a provincial level and made it available to all 60 districts, and had sort of 29,000 teachers ramped up in about 3 to 4 weeks. And then we also had to focus on helping them understand how to teach online using those tools, Microsoft Teams, etc. We worked very closely with our districts and partners. And we had to spin up a website focusing on parents and teachers. It was called Keep Learning BC. We started working on a health check, did a course on capacity building for teachers. Also, we had to look at what have we got in place. MyEd, for example, which is our student information system, and leveraging on some of the work we had done in the past, we were well positioned to actually make the use of that tool much easier and rapid for our users and our teachers and the system. So, for example, attendance. When we went back to school in June, if everyone recalls, we did a trial. It was really important for our ministry to understand, well, how many kids are coming back? How are they managing this? And so that required a lot of work on the MyEd team and that group to sort of change the way we did attendance, get that data in, make sure everybody was taking it the same way. So again, using Agile, making those nimble developments, getting our users involved. Other pieces that became important were things like the development and acceleration of online payment and online registration. So parents didn't have to go to the schools to actually register their kids. They could do everything online. Same with paying any fees, etc. So those projects, which were going to be implemented over a period, were accelerated rapidly. And again, supporting also our own team in shifting to a remote environment, learning how to, we took some of the stuff we learned about blended learning and social engagement and trying to keep a team spirit that we were providing to our teachers into our own work environment as well, and trying to maintain that. So I think we were really also looking at the whole thing on networking. One of our services is the Next Generation Network, and we have high-speed network to every school in the province and every public school, 1,600 schools. So how do we leverage that to help sort of some of the smaller and remote districts provide high-speed internet or internet that students could use? And we had all kinds of examples where people were putting devices and parents were driving into the school parking lot and leveraging the network that was available at the school. So just really impressed by the creativity and response of our sector and our team to that. Lots of focus on security as well, and helping schools and districts and our own team understand like the security requirements and cybersecurity, because as we know, when we first introduced Zoom, the biggest thing, I've never had as much email as I did because we brought Zoom in, and of course everyone was talking about Zoom bombing, and it's like, okay, it's not happening on this network. We have it secured. These are the things to do, but it was interesting.
I'm so curious about how you navigated such a complex environment from a stakeholder perspective. 1,600 schools, that's 1,600 communities, that's 1,600 schools worth of families and parents that are going to have views on that. How did you navigate that?
Yeah, so one of the things that's interesting about education is that we have 60 different school boards, and so we can't really, it's very hard for us to mandate anything. And so our whole student information service and our high-speed network, all of that was done with the cooperation and understanding of the school through MOUs with school districts. They didn't have to. It's not mandated. They don't have to use this system. So we just persuade them by showing them how good it is and how also the advantages of being part of a shared service. And so it took a long time, but MyEd is now in 60 out of 60 school districts, which was an achievement about a year and a half ago. So that has positioned us well when we spin something up quickly. There is trust in our sector and our system about the services that we provide. So we have very robust governance processes in place where we have representatives of every school district that sit on a service management council. They elect their own executive that works directly with our team. So it's constant communication and collaboration. they're involved in the agile process. So when we do program increments, representatives from our districts are part of the planning with us. And so one of the sort of pieces of advice I have, and I know I'm going all over the place, but is, engagement with your stakeholders and users early and constantly has really been extremely valuable to us, because it has built that trust and that ability for us to react quickly.
And that's such music to my ears, and I love hearing that idea of designing with and for the communities that we serve. I've heard you say that that COVID really accelerated some of your plans and maybe forced you to adopt a pace of change that you might not have otherwise. How does that fit into your broader strategy for modernizing the education system? And are there particular examples of initiatives that really stand out for you?
Yeah, I think one of them was, as I say, we were one of the first ministries to put a big system on the cloud. We put My Education on the cloud, and it was the first one with that personally identifiable information. So that happened a year and a half ago. So it was we didn't know COVID was coming. But I'm sure as heck glad we were on the cloud. We were able to ramp up that system really quickly. We have, it's the main communication system for districts with their parents. So for example, all these exposure letters are going out via MyEd, and districts have access to their parent information right away. The second one is just, we are really working hard to onboard our post-secondaries onto our graduation service, the student transcript service. One of our key roles is to actually take information in from districts and then graduate students. And we have worked with AEST and EPBC, Education Planner BC, on XML transcript service, where it's completely digital. So we're not sending batches of papers out. And again, we were planning this anyway, but we were able to accelerate this. We now have 22 of the institutions in BC doing digital transcripts. It means a student can log on anytime, say, I want my transcripts to go whenever there's a new mark to these institutions. And what has happened, of course, for those of you that have kids in school, that timetables changed. We had a usual, those of you who remember, 6x8 timetable. With COVID, the schedules changed, particularly in secondary school. They moved to quarter systems where the student is taking 2 courses at a time. They're finishing their classes at different intervals during the year. Those marks could get right up to the universities when that child or when that student had finished, as long as they had requested that. So having most of our institutions on that system has been great, and we're now moving it to Alberta and Ontario as well, so integrating with them. So that's one. We have also, as I said, online registration, online course selection, online payment, again, moving everything digital so people don't have to do it at the school, and the parents are not having to walk into the office and exposed and visit the schools, because we're really trying, everything really has been focused, I think, throughout the province on keeping schools open, because they're so integral to what we do.
So, Eleanor, one of our listeners has asked a question, and it's a bit of a tough one. And it sounds like you're making wonderful progress on the digital fronts. What are the measures that the ministry has put in place to ensure equity of access to the services that you're describing for people who perhaps live in rural or remote areas where there are connectivity challenges? Is that something that you're working through?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think one of the things that COVID has done has highlighted those, I would call it the digital discrepancy in our province, or the digital divide. We work with districts to provide service to the schools. In terms of the home network, that has been more of a challenge for us. And certainly we have worked with some of our providers and our school districts to make sure that families who've been identified as having challenges with connectivity are able to access the programs that are available through, some of our service providers. And we know that, so that information comes directly from the district. They hook the family up to the special programs, etc. The other piece that we've been able to do and work with our districts on is just helping them get their laptops and things out the door. And 23,000 laptops and devices went out with families. Now, that wasn't our work, but we certainly supported that and help districts manage that. But that really is more of the school district responsibility than ours.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's nice to hear that there is that consciousness of the digital divide and a really clear investment to work around it, work with it, distributing those laptops. So that sounds very, very positive. So on that, it sounds like you've made a lot of wonderful progress. I'd love to hear a little bit about your emerging priorities. And in the chat here, we've got a number of people who are asking about what is the vision for virtual learning for the future. So what are the emerging priorities? What's the path forward for you?
Oh, so I'm so glad you asked that, because we do have a number of priorities. And so online learning, I think, and remote learning is definitely something that is here to stay. It is part of within our mandate to continue the investment in remote and online learning. And it has actually been an area that we were starting to dig into. So I think like remote work, we are not going to put the online learning genie back into that bottle. And I think you're going to see that teachers and students will want more flexibility and choice. So a couple of things that we're doing, and that we had started, we have already modernized our legislation around online learning. We're going out, it's not a secret, with a procurement for a provincial learning management service that we will have. And again, that's to provide the same service across the province, so that students who are doing online learning aren't going to be doing something in Moodle with one course and Canvas and something else and Teams and something else and learning 4 or 5 systems. We're trying to provide that sort of central provincial infrastructure. Also done quite a bit around sharing resources, and created through a strategic investment fund project called ShareEd BC that came out of the telco deal. We've had some funding, and we've provided a kind of something called ShareEd BC, which is a provincial platform for all teachers in the province to share resources that are linked directly to the curriculum, set up a peer-to-peer network, chat with each other. Because again, some of our teachers are quite isolated. If you're the physics teacher in Burns Lake, you're not going to have a big pool of people to chat with in Burns Lake or in your district necessarily. So if you want to reach out to a colleague in the Lower Mainland about ideas and projects, we've created this, and it's again really a nice tool that we're very excited about launching. Other things that we're doing, we're looking at, we have something called a PEN system, personal education number. If you actually attended school in BC any time since 1990, you also have one of these personal education numbers. And we've used that to help improve our data quality, data integrity, and be able to track student outcomes over the time they enter school right up into post-secondary. So that was a very old system, and we are modernizing that, leveraging the new OpenShift environment and working with our teams on sharing components. So it's been a great success, and eventually we're going to link it to the BC Services card. So again, it's a one-stop shop. One piece of ID gets you access to your entire educational record and all our education services as well. So really moving forward on a number of fronts. Equity and anti-racism, as you know, is a huge piece of where we're going in the province, and we're looking at how do we make sure that we can collect that data in a secure way that's safe. We know that race-based data has been misused in the past, so we need it. We also need to protect it. So that's very foremost in front in our what we're thinking about.
Mm-hmm. That's great. We have one more question from the audience before I ask you to leave us with some advice. And so the question that's come in from AC is, can you share any student outcomes, planned and realized or not realized, due to the shift in e-learning? So reflections on the impact of this.
Yeah, we're actually just gathering that data. A couple of things. One, what we've noticed is that the impact has certainly had a disproportionate effect on students that are special needs, and so we're really looking at how do we address those learning gaps, that learning loss that may have occurred with certain students. On the other hand, with some of our other students, they love it. They actually are achieving higher outcomes, better marks, because they're able to focus and work on their own time. They have access to all the materials. If you miss the, factoring a binomial in class, you can always go and review that lesson until you get it. So there's been some really good outcomes, and we're actually going to be producing a report on the impact of COVID and learning later on, and again, able to do that because we're able to collect really good data from our system through, again, the digital tools that we've got in place. So
that's fantastic. We're almost out of time, but I don't want to end this without asking you for your advice. We have digital teams from across government represented on the call, and many of the members of those teams are looking to build similar services in their respective sectors. So do you have any tips or advice for digital teams across government?
Yeah, I do. And I think probably is, as I say, not a surprise to anyone in this team, but Agile really works. We have implemented Agile both with our vendors and internally, and we're really pleased with the progress. And I think not just how quickly stuff gets developed, but that how it hits the mark when it actually gets launched. And we're just getting such great feedback and response from people. So continue to strive towards that. The other thing, though, is don't underestimate the attachment of people to their old process, and really engage those end users early and often in the development of these new tools, and let them bring those ideas to you. The other part is focus on continuous improvement. I think we launch, and then what we've been really fortunate on is we've had some opportunities to keep building better. And I think that has really been a really good service to our users, that they know it's not one and done at the end of the project, that they keep having that life cycle of change and improvement. And, try and build your own team, build government technical expertise. We often relied so much on our external experts, and I think really building up your own team to take it on, that pride of ownership and excitement. It's kind of great to see that engagement inside, and not have all the external experts do all the fun stuff. Do the fun stuff in-house too.
I love that, and I especially love how well that aligns with the digital principles and things that we've seen really work. That focus on being agile, on the end users, on being iterative, and really trying to build that in-house capacity. We're just about at time. Did you have any closing thoughts or reflections to share with the group?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share some of what we're doing. Certainly open for anybody to reach out to me and ask questions. I'll connect you to the right people. Just to really appreciated some of the stuff that's been available to us through OCIO and the sharing of expertise. So the more we do this, the better we are as a team. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Eleanor, for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, and congratulations to you and your team on some pretty remarkable outcomes. We're going to wrap it up there. So thank you to everybody who joined us today. As always, we'll be circulating a link to a survey. We do really to pay attention to the outcomes of those surveys to, to try to figure out what's most helpful to people, what works, what doesn't. So we would really ask you to spend a couple of minutes to fill out that survey. And as always, please feel free to join the group, the digital government group that's on At Work, where we provide regular updates. And I will look forward to seeing you all again next month. Have a wonderful day.